Yeah, we'll start now. So thanks everyone for joining us for this presentation in Modern Pentathlon. This has been a very exciting collaboration between the Queensland Academy of Sport, Modern Pentathlon Australia, Griffith University, and the Queensland University of Technology, and ACEMS, which is the ARC Centre of Excellence for Mathematics and Statistical Frontiers. I hope I've got that right, Paul.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I'll just give a bit of a brief overview of the project team and introduce our presenters, and then I'll introduce. Everyone else will basically take it away in terms of their parts of the presentation. For those just joining us, so I can see that everyone's been really great in just muting and turning off their video. There will be the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, as well as if you have a question that comes up as our presenters are running through their presentation, just throw something in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to it at the end. All right, so this is our project team. So we've got Dane Jessen, who's in his final year of exercise and sports science from Griffith University and has also taken a role with Modern Pentathlon Australia. We've got Lawrence Garufi, who's just finished his double degree with the Queensland University of Technology and is working as a research assistant with ACEMS. We've got Dr. Paul Wu, who's a senior researcher with QUT and ACEMS. Associate Professor Claire Minahan from Griffith University. She's an Associate Professor in Sports Science on the Gold Coast. And then obviously Hannah Every Hall, who's the Pathways and Performance Director from Modern Pentathlon Australia. And myself, I'm Luke McDonald. I'm a performance scientist from the Queensland Academy of Sport. So I just mentioned earlier, I'll give I'm going to hand it over to Paul in a second to give a bit of an introduction in terms of ACEMS and the exciting projects they have in elite sport currently, and some of the exciting things that are going to be happening in the future. And then I'll give just a background on the project and how it's come about and where we've gotten to. And then I'll hand it over to Dane and Lawrence to present the findings of this project. So thanks, Paul.
Thanks for the introduction, Luke. Hi, everyone. So I thought it might be worthwhile to let you know about who are these people who do this data science. Well, what do they look like? So we're basically a group of quite diverse backgrounds, actually. Everything from statisticians, mathematicians, to computer scientists, engineers, even applied science. Some of our students, for example, come from domains like marine biology and or medicine, even. So we've got two centers going on, actually. One is the Center for Data Science. So that's the one that started last year, goes for 5 years at QUT, and kind of covers the pipeline from getting the data for discovery, how do you design experiments, to modeling, to turn that data into something useful, all the way to applying it and supporting decisions. And this could be in domains including business, environment, health, social systems, and currently, hopefully you'll get started soon, a domain in sports, actually. And next, click, please. And so, oh, sorry, just back one. Yeah, that's perfect. So Luke mentioned ACEMS, so that's the Center of Excellence. That's wrapping up at the end of this year, and included it's a pretty big center across many universities across Australia. But basically, we're trying to continue those collaborations going forwards. Next slide. So what have we been doing? We've been working with, we had the great pleasure to work with actually AIS, QAS, swimming, triathlon, West Coast Eagles, and others on over 22 projects to date since 2016. The core team, I guess, with myself, distinguished Professor Kerry Mengerson and Professor Chris Stravandi. And then this has kind of happened through a variety of mechanisms, including a lot of undergraduate students and vacation research, internships, a joint postdoc we had actually, and we want to build forwards into master's and PhD projects. So what do we do? I thought it might be helpful just to give a quick example. Next slide, please. So one of the things we did, and Lawrence was on this project, was to model winning times for all swimming events at Olympics. This was with Swimming Australia that we did this work. So you have different strokes, distances, and genders, and there's of course the actual winning times, medaling times, qualifying times historically, and we want to know, well, how fast do you need to be able to qualify for the delayed Olympics this year or 2024? How fast to go to medal, or what is your chance of getting a gold medal actually? So click please. We developed this model in conjunction with Swimming Australia. So there's this interesting back and forth where we did some work, we produced some plots, and then that goes to Swimming Australia, and Swimming Australia takes it to the head coach when we're doing this, the Yako, and then kind of get feedback of how about these problems, or we think this is more of what's happening. So it's this real collaborative back and forth. At the end of it, so there were of course your academic outcomes and statistical outcomes like journal papers that's currently under revision, but also all the interim presentations, reports along the way, and this dashboard at the end. So this is a web app. So basically it could be anywhere on your phone or computer and be able to very quickly look at different events, look at potential predictions, and bring up the analysis very quickly. Next click. So I think that's been a really valuable and rewarding collaboration to generate these insights. And this is kind of being an example of some of the many projects that we've had to being able to do with various sporting partners. And then, yeah, of course, being able to be physically there. Things like the National Trust is always very exciting. And yeah, undercover statisticians. So next slide, please. What's happening going forwards is that we really want to be able to grow and increase our capacity. So kind of to tackle key challenges and support day-to-day decisions in sports and fitness through innovations at the intersection of data science and sports, exercise, physiology, kind of thing. So what we're not so much what we're proposing, we'll hopefully get started actually in the coming weeks, is this structure where we have a core team, industry research fellow, it's myself and 3 PhD students who are working at the intersection between data science and particular sport or sports, and then really be able to share and collaborate in the core team and also with sports. And so that's kind of one of the exciting things going forward that we just wanted to let you be aware of. And that's it, Luke.
Thanks, Paul. All right, so I just want to give everyone a bit of a background for this Modern Pentathlon project. So in November 2018, I started working with Reese Lansky, current number 2 modern pentathlete, male modern pentathlete in Australia, and providing sports science services to him and his coaches, and had many a great discussion with the coaches about what world's best looks like and how we can prepare Reese and for international competition, and obviously how that would have an on-flow effect for other athletes competing in the sport in Australia. In April last year, I was very lucky to forge a great relationship with Hannah from Modern Pentathlon Australia. We began discussions about performance benchmarking, what it takes to win in this sport, and having conversations about the fact that you don't need to be the best at all 5 disciplines to succeed. And basically, it's a very tricky sport to get a handle on in terms of, we've got 5 disciplines, and how do we put systems in place to help our athletes succeed. And we both knew that there was this incredible data source available through the UIPM website, and how do we get someone on board that can collate this data for us and in a meaningful way so that we can utilize it in the future. So in May 2020, I had conversations with Claire Minahan from Griffith University, and she told me she had this gun undergrad student named Dane Jessen, and I was lucky to get him on board on this project, and he did a huge amount of work around data collation for this project from May until October, and then I gave Paul Wu a phone call and said, because we've worked on a few projects beforehand, and I said, look, I've got this amazing project that I think would be really meaningful in the sport of modern pentathlon. I'd love to have you on board if possible. And Paul, as you've previously heard, he's got his fingers in a lot of exciting pies in elite sport. And he said, do you remember Lawrence Garufi? And I said, yeah, I do. He did some great work in triathlon previously, and so we're lucky to have a collaboration with Lawrence and Paul through QUT and ASEMS from October, whereby they really sort of took lead with the analysis of the data to answer the questions that we had around this project. And we finished up the analyses in February this year, and that brings us to now where we're disseminating this information. The team's done a huge amount of work, and I think that we found some very interesting results and meaningful takeaways and practical applications for the sport. So I guess the rationale behind doing this project was to, for me initially have a meaningful impact with Reece. Obviously, my goal within the QAS is to get him, competitive at the international level. But then it's sort of turned into something much bigger and much more meaningful for the sport within Australia. So I'm just going to hand it over to Dane now, and he can take it away with the processes he's been through and the research questions that we've answered.
Thanks, Luke. So my name's Dane. I'm a final year exercise and sports science student at Griffith Uni down on the Gold Coast. And I've recently taken up a role with Modern Pentathlon Australia to implement an athlete monitoring system and sports science system. And like Luke was saying, my role within the project was mainly around the data collation side of the project. So I went through the UIPM website and pulled the data from the World Championship events. For those of you that are unaware, the UIPM is essentially the International Union for Modern Pentathlon, and they publish all of the results from previous international modern pentathlon events. So on screen at the moment, there is a table just running through the variables that I pulled from the website. So we've gone with the 2017, 2018 and 2019 World Championships, and that's inclusive of senior, junior and under 19s. And then for each event, there's a few variables that we were able to pull off the website. So within each event, we've been able to get the result within the event. So if the swimming example would be the swim time. We've also been able to get the rank within that particular event. So once again, with swimming, it would be the swim rank, and then also the modern pentathlon score that was associated with that particular event and discipline. So it's pretty consistent with swimming, fencing and show jumping, but then you can also see within the laser run event, we've got a pretty comprehensive look at the results in the laser run. So some of the variables that are included there are the laser run time, so the complete time it took an athlete to finish the laser run, the total shooting time, so just the amount of time that an athlete spent shooting in the laser run. Similarly, the total running time, so just the time spent running. We've got average run pace, which was measured in minutes per kilometre. Average cadence, so cadence, if you're unaware, is the time period when an athlete is shooting between each time they pull the trigger. Then we've got average accuracy. So this is just measured in percentage. Then we've got the laser run score and laser run rank. And then overall in modern pentathlon, we've got the event placing in each competition. So where they placed overall, and then their total score in modern pentathlon. So I'll get you to go to the next slide, Luke. Great. So yeah, now that we've got this data set, there's a few research questions that we wanted to answer. The very first of these, and the one that I'll cover briefly, is characterizing world's best in modern pentathlon, and this is across different age groups and genders. The second question is, what disciplines most influence end performance in modern pentathlon? And then the third question was, how does shooting strategy and technique affect overall performance in the laser run? And this is looking at cadence and accuracy and running pace and those sorts of variables within the laser run. I'll get you to go to yeah, thanks, Luke. So I'll run you through some results tables now. First off, I'll just explain the format of the tables. So this particular results table is looking at swim times. So along the top here, you can see that you've got each year of the World Championship, so 2017, 2018, and 2019. And then on the left side, you can see that it's broken up into each gender and then the age group within each gender. So the top 3 column, that is indicative of the third highest time in the final event of that year, and that's event specific, so just for the swimming event in this table. Similarly with the top 10, so that's the 10th highest time in the final event for that year, which is event specific. So a good way to think of these times is essentially the cutoff time for the top 3 in that year, or the cutoff time for the top 10 in that year. Some trends that we saw here is that the best swimmers in modern pentathlon were males were swimming at around that time of 2 minutes, roughly. And then females were swimming at roughly a time of 2 minutes and 10 seconds. But with the nature of modern pentathlon, although you may not be the best in one particular event, it doesn't mean that you can't still do well, and vice versa. So I'll get you to go to the next table, Luke. So this table here is the exact same table, but it's also included a qualifying column. So how this qualifying column works is that this is the lowest result achieved that's still qualified for the final event. So as you can see in the past, although someone isn't the best swimmer in the qualifications, you can see that it's still possible to qualify for the final event. So for example, you can see that roughly some of these people are around 10 seconds behind the best swimmers in the final event, and they're still able to qualify for the final. So yeah, although you may do well in the swimming event, it doesn't guarantee that you'll do well overall. And although you may not be the best swimmer in modern pentathlon, it doesn't mean that you can't still do well in the competition. So I'll just get to the next slide. So now we'll just go over some of the laser run variables. So this top table is looking at the laser run total time. Between each year and each age group, there is a bit of variability, and we think this may happen because between each world championship and each age group, the course changes. So there might be different turns that an athlete has to run around, or the the surface they're running on may change, so it would affect their running. So there is a bit of variability in that top table, but within the laser run, we can break it down. So the next table that we look at is just total shooting time. So this is just the total amount of time within the laser run that the athlete spent shooting. And the trends that we can see here is that the best shooters in modern pentathlon are spending roughly around 40 seconds shooting during the laser run. So another way to think of that is that at each of the 4 shooting stations, they're taking on average about 10 seconds to complete those shots. Once again, you can have a look at the qualifying. There are athletes there that are spending 100 seconds shooting, but they still qualify for the final. So once again, you can have a look at these people that are performing really well in the shooting. It's not the be all and end all. So it doesn't mean that you can't still qualify without having these results. We'll go on to the next slide now. So these tables have broken down the shooting once again. So we've got an average shot cadence in the top table, and then the average shot accuracy in the bottom table. So having a look at the cadence trends, what we've found in the data set, so in the last 3 World Championships, athletes with the fastest cadence are shooting below 2 seconds. This doesn't mean that they're performing well, it just indicates that they've got a fast cadence. So you can see that people in the qualify column, they're still qualifying for the final event with cadences of around the mid 2s. Then we can drop down. Oh, also, I'll just note as well, there's quite a lot of data that I'm presenting in these tables. So I'm just going over some of the trends, but everyone will have access to these tables. We'll hand out a document so you can go through them pretty thoroughly. But yeah, so if we go into the accuracy trends, we can see that in the past 3 World Championships, the best shooters in modern pentathlon have an accuracy of around 80 to 90%, which is fantastic. I'm sure it's something that a lot of modern pentathletes would strive for. But once again, athletes are still qualifying for the finals with accuracies of 50%. So it just shows that variability that although you may not be the best in one particular event, you've still got the chance to qualify. Now we'll go on to the final results table. This table is just looking at total points scored. So there is quite a bit of variability in this table, and that may result from the allocation of points within each gender and age group. Of note is that the under 19 age group and the whole qualification column is significantly lower, and this larger difference is mainly probably because of the absence of show jumping within these events. But yeah, to summarize the data tables or the results tables that we've looked at, they show trends of what the world's best modern pentathletes are performing at in each event individually. But it also indicates that you don't have to be the best at one particular event or the best at, or you may be poor at one particular event. You've still got an opportunity to qualify for the final. So it sort of brings in the question, in modern pentathlon, what is the best approach? What's the best approach to winning? So that leads nicely into our second research question of what disciplines most influence end performance in modern pentathlon, and whether or not there's events that we should be focusing more of our time on because it's more heavily weighted and can influence the end performance more so. So with that in mind, I'll hand it over to Lawrence and he can run you through some of the analysis that we've done to try and answer the second 2 research questions.
Oops, we might be missing a slide. Oh, sorry, yeah. My name is Lawrence, and I work at the Centre for Data Science as a research assistant. I've been working there since 2016, and I've worked on a number of different sports, including swimming and triathlon, and now modern pentathlon. So on the screen here, we have a radar plot, and this radar plot is for the senior males 2017 to 2019 World Championships, and we're only looking at first, second, and third place getters here. So we can see that we have swim scores, fencing scores, show jumping scores, and run shoot scores, and this plot allows us to look at how these 4 events combine in order for these athletes to get a medal. So if we have a look at the swim scores, the athletes that are winning medals are ranging in swim scores between 290 and 320 points, whereas their fencing scores range from about 210 and 255 points. But as Dane has mentioned before, the combinations of these different points for all the different events differ between these athletes, even among the medalists. So I think one of the points we want to emphasize today is you may have a strong event and you may have a weaker event, but that doesn't mean you still aren't a chance for a medal. Next slide, please. So here we have the same radar plot except for females. And we can also see that, again, what's interesting is for the show jumping, the females were actually higher for the medalists. So they only had a minimum of 280, and a lot of these medalists were getting a perfect 300 points. But their swimming scores and their laser run scores were a little bit lower than the males. Next slide, please. So when we were answering our second research question of what disciplines most influence and performance in modern pentathlon, we used a random forest model. The benefits of this model include that it clearly ranks the importance of the modern pentathlon disciplines, has a high predictive accuracy, it is robust, and is quite widely used in not only in sport, but in a number of different aspects in research. And the random forest model that we used was accurate within 18 points when we were predicting total score. So when we're talking about total scores of around 1,300 points, our model was accurate or predicted within 18 points, which is quite good. Next, please. Yeah, so as Paul mentioned, we've used similar models to predict winning swim times for the World Championships and Olympic events from 2010 to 2019. And we were able to achieve predictions within 0.57% accuracy, which is also, really good. Next, please. And random forest models have been used in a number of different applications. So one of these was in rugby union, and this paper has been published in Journal of Science and Medicine and Sport. Next, please. And random forest models have also been used in other disciplines, such as chemistry, which we can see from this research paper. Next, please. So just as I'm going through our analysis today, it's important to keep in mind that access to all information across the genders and the age groups is going to be provided in a separate document, and explanations are going to be provided with this. So if some of the things I'm talking about don't make sense, you can just pop a question in the chat box or go through the document we'll hand out later. Next, please. So the first thing I'll be going through today is the World Championships heats. So we can see this from this graph here, that for the heats in the World Championships, fencing and the laser run have the highest influence on World Championship performance in the heats. This is when we're predicting the total score for the heats. Next, please. Here, based on our random forest model, we have these heat maps. So I'll just spend some time now explaining how we read these. And again, if I'm moving too fast, just pop a comment in the chat. So when we look at the top left heat map first, the colors on the right-hand side indicate the total score in the heats. So a red color is a low total score of about 900 points, whereas a blue color is a very high total score of 1,000 points. And on the x-axis, along the horizontal, we have the fencing score, and along the vertical, we have the swimming score. So we can see for a very low fencing score of 150 points, we only see this red color. So we only see a low total score. Whereas if we move across to the right, to a fencing score of 250 points, all we're seeing is this blue color. So we're seeing a high total score in the heats. But if we look vertically, so up and down across swim score, we're not seeing a very much change in color. We're only seeing a change in color going from left to right. So what that tells us is that fencing has a higher influence on end performance in the heats compared to swimming. So the practical application of this is that we can establish the relative importance of the disciplines and then adjust training priorities accordingly to gain a competitive advantage. So for that example I just went through, fencing is more important than swimming. So maybe athletes might put more of their training priorities onto fencing compared to swimming, especially if they're looking at make the final during the heat events. Next, please. So in this model here, we're looking at predicting the score before the final event. So we're just looking at predicting the score before the laser run has even happened. So in this graph here, we can see that fencing has the greatest influence on the score before the final event. So that means if you want to have a really good handicap, fencing is the most important compared to swimming and then followed by show jumping. Next, please. So again, we have the same heat maps as we saw for the heats, but now we have them for the score before the final event. And again, in the document we hand out, we'll have all of these different heat maps, so you can go through them in detail. But we're seeing the same story as we saw in the heats, especially when you look at the swimming against fencing heat map on the top right. We can see that a high fencing score indicates a better score before the final event, no matter how high your swimming score is, really. Next, please. So here we're predicting total score. So we're predicting total score for all the events that include show jumping. So that's senior and junior finals, because they're the only events that have the show jumping discipline. And when we look at the graph here, you might see that in this graph, the laser run's first, fencing second, show jumping's third, and swimming is fourth. But in some of the other graphs, swimming was before show jumping. And it's just important to note that we're predicting different things. So here we're predicting your total score, where swimming is the least influential. But when we're predicting the score before the final event or your heat score, this order may change. So it's just important to keep that in mind. So here we can see that the laser run and fencing are, again, the most important disciplines. And the practical application is to focus your training on those disciplines to gain a competitive advantage in terms of increasing your total score. Next, please. So this is the fencing and swimming interaction heat map for predicting total score. So I've just got this one a bit larger so I can go through it in a little bit more detail. It's very similar to what I explained before for the heat map. So on the right-hand side, we have the colors with a low total score being a red color and a high total score being a blue color, with fencing on the x-axis and swimming on the y-axis, swimming being vertical. And again, we can see that for a fencing score of about 100, it doesn't really matter if you have a swimming score of over 300. Your total score is still quite low. Whereas if you have a fencing score of 250 and a swimming score of 300, then you're looking at a total score of over 1,360, which is very good. So from these heat maps, we can have a look at how the different combinations of, in this case, swimming and fencing, but it can be the different combinations of the disciplines. We can have a look at how the two events combine and how you can mix and match the different scores to see how your total score comes out in the end. Next slide, please. So this slide just has all the different combinations for the heat maps when we're predicting total score for junior and senior finals. So we can compare swimming and fencing, show jumping and fencing, fencing and laser run, etc. And again, the practical application of this is once you establish the relative importance of the disciplines, you can then adjust your training priorities. Yeah, next please. So now we'll have a look at the laser run. So as Dan mentioned, we have these variables within the laser run discipline, and they include the running pace, shoot interval time, shot accuracy, and average cadence. So in this model, we're predicting the laser run score, again, for the junior and senior finals. And we can see that your running pace has the most influence on your laser run score, which sort of makes sense because it is the largest proportion of that event. And then followed by the shoot interval time, your shot accuracy, and then your average cadence. So the practical application is an increase in average running pace will give the most benefit in terms of your laser run performance. Next, please. And yes, we can produce the heat maps for these laser run variables as well. All the different combinations, again, will be available in the big document we can disperse. Just highlighted in the red box, we're comparing average running pace and average shoot interval time. So if you have we're sort of seeing the same trend that we saw when we were comparing fencing and swimming. So a really low running pace of 200 seconds per kilometer and a really low shoot interval time of 10 seconds at each shooting station, you're going to have a really high laser run score. And we can see from that top left-hand graph that we're looking at, again, if you have a really slow running pace, doesn't really matter how good you are at shooting, we're still seeing that red color towards the right of that graph. So you're going to have a low laser run score overall if you have a slow running pace. Next, please. So the next couple of slides are going through the shooting technique. So here we're looking at a graph where we're comparing shot accuracy, that's on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, and average cadence, which is the y-axis, the vertical axis. And the black faded dots are all the international competitors at the World Championships, and the blue dots are our Australian athletes that competed at the World Championships from 2017 to 2019. We can see from this graph that almost all the athletes are shooting at a cadence of 2.5 or below. And even some of our Australian athletes are achieving that standard as well. So we can see that no matter what your accuracy is, we can see that quite dispersed from left to right. So no matter what your accuracy is, most athletes at the World Championships are shooting at least 2.5 seconds or faster. Next, please. This graph here compares shot accuracy and total shoot time. So on the x-axis, again, we have shot accuracy, the horizontal axis, and then total shoot time is on the y-axis, the vertical axis. And you can see from these dots that we have a bit of a curved shape. So going from a 25% accuracy to a 50% accuracy, we can see that those dots significantly drop. You get a big decrease in your total shoot time if you increase your accuracy from 25 to 50%. Whereas if we compare from 75% to 100% accuracy, we're not getting as big of a drop in your total shoot time, getting as much of a gain for that same increase in your shot accuracy. And it might be much harder to go from, say, a 90% accuracy to 100% accuracy compared to going from a 25% to a 50% accuracy. So the practical application of this is to focus your training on other disciplines. Once achieving a shot accuracy of 80%, because your total shoot time is already quite low anyway. But of course, this needs to be combined with a fast cadence as well. So when we're looking at reducing your total shoot time, we're looking at combining having a higher accuracy and a fast cadence. Next, please. Here we have the same graph that we were looking at 2 slides ago when we were looking at Australia against the international athletes. But here the dots are colored by gender, male and female. Again, we have shot accuracy on the X and average cadence on the Y axis. We can see that both colors are below 2.5 seconds in terms of their average cadence. So we're not seeing much of a difference between the genders, which is quite interesting. So this tells us that the shooting standard across the genders is quite similar. We're also seeing the same thing that we saw 2 slides ago. No matter what your accuracy is really, most athletes at the World Championships are shooting below 2.5 seconds. So as a developing athlete, one of the practical applications can be to focus training on other disciplines. Once you achieve an average cadence of about 2.5 seconds or below and a shot accuracy of about 80%, because you've already almost achieved the world standard in terms of your shooting technique. So you might want to focus your training on some of your other weaknesses. Next slide, please. So to finish off today, I'm just going to go through some of our key practical applications. So the first one is to focus training on the laser run and fencing disciplines to gain a competitive advantage. Second one is to establish we can establish the relative importance of the disciplines and then adjust training priorities accordingly to gain a competitive advantage. And we can do this using those heat maps and looking at all the different relationships from all those graphs. Again, for developing athletes, you can focus on other training disciplines once you achieve an average shooting cadence of below 2.5 seconds and a shot accuracy of 80%, because we found that this is the world standard at the World Championships. We also saw for the laser run, it's most important to increase your average running pace because this gives the most benefit in terms of your performance for that final event. And all these practical applications can be used to help coaches, athletes, and their support staff to make more informed decisions that are backed by data. Next slide, please. So just a couple of limitations in terms of the work we've done. So these are just preliminary findings based on the great work Dane has done in compiling a great data set for us. And all these recommendations should just be used as a guide. Another thing of note is that we only have a limited number of medalists in this data set because there's only 3 medalists per year for the World Championships for each gender and for each age group. So the future work around this project is to expand the data so we can validate our findings, and also to improve the statistical modelling to better capture some of the hierarchies present in modern pentathlon. And something else exciting is that we can do some what-if scenario analysis. So this can help us where we can answer the question of how athletes can reach the podium by using their strengths and improving in disciplines where they can gain a competitive advantage. And through our graphs and things today, we've shown some of the disciplines where a competitive advantage can be made. Next slide, please. So some of the key thoughts that we'll leave you with today is that good modern pentathletes are good all-rounders, but we have shown today that there are disciplines to focus on in order to gain a competitive advantage. And exceptional athletes at one discipline need to combine this with minimum standards in other disciplines in order to reach the podium. So on that note, I might pass on to Luke. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lawrence. Thanks so much, Dane and Paul, for your wonderful insights on this project. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of our organisations, to Griffith Uni and to QIS Spike for their funding support on this project, and to QUT and ASEMS and Modern Pentathlon Australia. It's been a wonderful project. And for those in the audience, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat. We'll hang around for a while to answer any questions you have, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. I might kick off the questions if no one has anything. I've got one for Lawrence and Paul, especially Paul. Based on the project that we've been able to do, how do you think that this is like? How can we transfer this across to other sports potentially?
Yeah, interesting question there, Luke. So I guess the obvious sports would be other multidisciplinary sports, triathlon, decathlon, those kinds of things. But I guess at the end of the day, it's kind of looking at, well, what are the factors and what are the standards you need to meet on these different aspects of the sport? For example, it might be swimming time, it might be running time, it might be some sort of cadence measure or something else, to achieve some chance, some probability of getting a gold medal, some chance of a bronze medal, that kind of thing. So that's one, definitely one aspect to it when you have the data. So that's always something to keep in mind, right? We do modeling, and that's kind of representing our best interpretation of the data and its limitations too, right? That's the whole kind of uncertainty around it. In some sports, for example, this is some part of our current work. If it's fairly new, there's not much data, and so the example here is for mixed relay triathlon. And in this particular sport, we're doing some simulation models. So if we can simulate athletes running or cycling, and then having the drafting between cyclists and that kind of thing, we can use the data that we do have and then simulate over all these many thousands of possible scenarios to see what is the chance of getting gold, silver, bronze, what's the chance of coming out of the swim in a triathlon context, so that you can join the lead group of cyclists, all these kinds of things. So yeah, these kinds of approaches, and then there are limitations to them. And so there's on the data science side, there's also methodological challenges too. But that's kind of where the opportunities are too for PhD research and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very exciting. And just wanted to reiterate to everyone in the audience, and obviously, to Hannah, that this document that the gents have been talking about is, you know, it's quite large. Obviously, it's been a huge analysis, but there's some really interesting findings in there, and it will be available for anyone that wants to access it. Certainly within Australia, let's keep this information within the Australian sporting system. But you know, if there are any questions in the future for those that work in the you know, that train or coach in the sport of modern pentathlon, you know, to feel free to reach out if there are any questions, or for anyone else who, you know, might be in a similar sport that wants to, you know, look at a similar scenario. There might be some opportunities there with the new project with the Centre of Data Sciences, collaboration with the QAS and AIS in the future.
Yeah, and we're also always keen for feedback and comments or suggestions as well.
Great. So does anyone have any questions? If not, we might call it a day. And obviously this presentation's been recorded. So if there's anyone that you think might be interested, we'll have this available to view, or, you know, who may have missed it. They'll certainly have access to it after today. I can see that in the chat there's been some great feedback. Thanks so much. Here we go. It's been quite a few. Yeah, so from Amos, thank you. This has given me some great insights to improve my training structure and ideas from my own data analysis on Triathlon that I've been conducting recently. So excellent. Thank you, Amos. From Brooke, thanks. Great insights. Thanks, Brooke. Simon Rogers from the AIS. Great work to all who pulled a great data set together. Definitely recorded. Thanks, Simon. From Tom, so what effect do you think the new triathlon format, so 600 run instead of 800, including the swim, will have on the data? Also, the fact that it will be all within 90 minutes. I think that's a really great question, Tom. I think, and we've had many conversations about this within the project team, because this is something that we need to consider. And I think that it may fall. I think what we'll probably see when the sport transitions to the new format is that I think that they'll continue having the typical or the current format in some form at World Cups and World Championships. I can't confirm that, but I'm just going off of similar sports such as triathlon that they've transitioned to to the shorter sprint races and super sprints, but they still have the Olympic distance as part of Olympic qualification. So I think that in that way, this will remain very valid and important. At the same time, as there are format changes and as we do therefore gather future data in the future on performance in the new format, we can probably run similar analysis to see if there are any differences and similarities in the disciplines and how much they influence and performance. I think it'll really depend on how many points are on offer in each of the disciplines and how they interact with one another. Does any of the project team have any other insights on that question? It's a great question, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, not sure I fully caught the beginning of that, sorry. But I guess we just have to bear in mind that changing the format, this model informs based on the current format. So, but that's also somewhere where you may want to do some simulation studies as well to bolster, and also to look at what if scenarios too, and then update. And so I guess that's quite a common problem across many industries actually. So how do I keep my models updated? And that's a research question in itself too. But yeah, in the first instance, it's kind of like as new data comes in, and this is where some of the statistical approaches can be helpful. We keep updating the model to hopefully get something that's a bit more confident and provide better suited insight. Have you seen a question from Amos in the chat too?
Yeah, yep. Maybe I'm yeah. There's another question here. So have you considered looking into the diminishing returns of training in each sport? For example, working to achieve 1 second improvement in swimming versus 3 seconds in running. And this is kind of what this is all about, Amos. And that's a fantastic question. And I think I'm going to hand this over to Dane to answer this question, because I know he's very well versed in this area, through this project and his new role with Modern Pentathlon. So I'll take it away, Dane.
Thanks, Luke. Throwing me in the deep end. No, yeah, it's really interesting, because along the process of doing this research, there's been another paper that we found by some Korean researchers that have done something similar. And although we didn't really look at exact differences in what a difference of 1 second in swimming would be compared to running, I think it's something that we'd be able to figure out using the results that we currently have. But it is interesting because the Korean paper, which they did multiple linear regression, they were suggesting something similar, that like a 1 second improvement. So achieving points or 1 win in fencing was the equivalent to gaining, I think, around 7 seconds in swimming. So it is quite a big advantage. But no, it's definitely something that we could look at doing.
Sorry. Oops. Can I just jump in? I think that's where these heat maps come in. So you can have a look at the heat map for whatever you're trying to achieve. So it might be your total score. And you can have a look at, so you've said swimming against running. So you can have a look at the swimming and running heat map, and then match how the different points for running and swimming combine to get your total score. And I guess that's a way we can use this analysis to answer your question in terms of what does a 1 second improvement correspond to in another sport.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lawrence. And I think, Dane, it was, as we know, obviously, and you'd speak to this, you have a better knowledge of this than I do, around, how many points are gathered for a certain swim score. I believe that the reference point is 2 minutes 30, which gives you a certain amount of points. And then there's for every 0.5 of a second faster, you gain a point. And then obviously vice versa. If you're slower by 0.5 of a second, you lose a point. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and then obviously how that comes into play using the heat maps, but also against what the rules are. But, in, say, the laser run for, the laser run obviously has a time as a reference, and points are based off of that reference. And for every day, jump in when you want around the rules. But for every second faster or every few seconds faster, there are points allocated or taken away if it's slower. Is that right?
Which event was that you were just talking about?
The laser run.
Yeah, so it's for every 1 second is equivalent to 1 point.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, and yeah, great insights, Lawrence. And thanks for that great question, Amos. Oh, here we go. I was thinking in terms of time spent training versus points gained, but obviously it varies. Yeah, look, that's a great question. In terms of it varies between the individuals and models. Yeah, and we sort of we could sort of go down the rabbit hole in terms of what the training distribution looks like across the week. And I mean, for me personally, it's a conversation I have all the time with the coaches of Reese, and how we potentially need to focus on other training modalities versus some that we may have focused on previously. And yeah, you're right. It might take, if you're training, say, 4 sessions a week in the pool, and you want to achieve, you might be swimming a 210 for a 200 freestyle and you want to get to a 208. Or, is it worth getting in the pool, another couple of sessions a week to achieve that 2 second decrease in time, or should you really go, well, hey, I'm happy with 2:10. The point differential is not that great, but if I can improve my laser run performance through my running pace by adding some extra volume into my running, should I be spending more time on my fencing if there's more potential there? And I suppose, as you said, it's very individualized with respect to what are the strengths and weaknesses of athletes, of those individual athletes, and where can you gain a competitive advantage. So I think it needs to be individualized for each athlete. Does anyone else have any other questions? Great questions, by the way. Thanks, everyone. All right, so if we don't have any more, I might wrap this up and we'll stop the recording. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks again so much for Lawrence and Dane, Paul, and obviously with the organisations and their support for this project to happen. Once again, we will have a document to disseminate. Everyone and anyone will have access to this video recording if they wanted to have a look at it, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions once reading the document or after today. More than happy to answer them.